Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Hold 'em Accountable. Of course, I'm Derrick Holder. I'm joined today by Kristie Holder, my wonderful wife, by Kacey Blundell, running for state senate, and Kirsten Root, also running for state senate. The three of us, myself, Kacey, and Kirsten, are all former DCS employees. Kristie, along with myself, are also former foster parents. So today we are discussing Department of Child Services and everything that can be done better throughout the foster system. So let's start with Kacey. What did you do with Indiana Department of Child Services?
Was a family case manager for Indiana Department of Child Services for 4 years. I served 2 counties. I was in the permanency, which for people who don't know the difference between family case managers, you have the assessment team, which is they are the investigators per se. And then you have the permanency team, which when a case opens, that a case gets transferred from the assessment to permanency, and we work reunification, or in the event that reunification is not possible, we find permanency for those children involved with the department. With that being said, however, because of the 2 counties that I served, I also did, we did 24-hour on calls. So, I would also be called out at all hours of the night and have to go do an assessment on, if the police called us in, if something happened. So I wore multiple hats. I was also, because I was permanency, I also did interstate compact agreements, which means that if I could not find a placement for a child on my caseload in the state of Indiana, or there was family outside of the state of Indiana, I then would coordinate with that other state and continue the case in that other state, which meant a whole heck of a lot of travel. I had one kid placed at one point in time in Florida. So, yeah, DCS would put me on a plane. I would take a plane ride to Florida. They would rent me a car. I would drive to the kiddo's house. I would see the kiddo, talk to the kiddo, meet with the kiddo, then get back on a plane all within 24 hours. So, yeah, it's a lot, but that's what I did for the department. I also did some human trafficking roundtables and different things within that realm. Yeah, it was rough. I participated in a lot of adoptions, a lot of reunifications, but also a lot of terminations. And for those that don't know what a termination is, that's when the court removes parental rights from the involved parents because they have not completed their necessary, what the department deems necessary to have the children come back safely and live with them. So, yeah.
And Kirsten, what did you do?
Yeah, so my first role with the department was in their background checks unit. So I was doing background checks for foster parents, placements, any sort of childcare facility, employment, all those fun things. And then I was a family case manager in assessments in Hamilton County for about 3 years. So I was investigating child abuse and neglect, including sexual abuse, domestic violence. I was on our fatality team. So anything and everything I would be called out for and be investigating alongside law enforcement or just on our own if they weren't involved. I was also a team lead and a peer lead, so training up new family case managers and advocating for the ones currently on our team. I also participated in several legislative roundtables, essentially, to talk about policy and how we can make things better for the agency, allegedly.
And I was a paralegal with DCS for 3 years, down in Monroe County. I was on the paralegal roundtable. I was also in the trafficking roundtable. There's many times that I was also on the rapid response team because they needed someone from legal to be on there. And Kristie,
Okay. I am just a foster parent. Previous. Yeah. I brought the kids in, took care of them, and then shipped them back.
let's get into the nuts and bolts of this conversation. What in your mind, I know this is a very loaded question, what in your mind is wrong with DCS right now? We'll go with Kirsten first.
Okay. The root issue that there is with DCS is, like, of course, funding is one of them. We're not using money in a way that makes people stay with the agency, in a way that supports our foster parents, in a way that supports parents. Secondary to that, though, I would say that DCS is a reactionary agency, so it's not the agency's fault. That is something at the state level of they're only responding to child abuse. But the issue that we see as a state is that there aren't any preventative measures being put in to support working families. So then DCS comes in, they say we don't punish poverty. And while that's technically policy, that's not necessarily true. So I've had families who are living on a porch, mom's dealing with drug addiction and had been human trafficked. Okay, how can we get her support so that she can continue to take care of her kids? Well, we don't actually have any resources, so that's a big problem. Additionally, leadership changes. I started out under Terry Stigdon. I had a great experience with her. She would come into the field and talk to us and at the very least, like, have conversations. But over time, leadership changed drastically to where the measurements of what it meant for a child to be safe were not about what child safety actually was. It was, for us in assessments, how quickly can you close out an investigation? Because if you can tell me that after seeing a kid for 30 minutes, you know they're safe at home, I don't believe you. I don't think you're doing your job. I think those are the big things, though, are that, like, leadership isn't listening to the people who are actually doing the work across the board. I mean, I had issues with that, even just with supervisors in my office. People get biased and they spend a lot of time in the agency. You get worn down. Things that are horrific appear less horrific after you've been doing it for so long. So you get a bias. And a lot of people don't leave the agency when they probably should. So I think those are my core of what I would say are wrong with DCS.
Kristie, from the outside, as a foster parent,
I would have to say the fact that they really don't listen to the foster parents, considering we're the ones with the children 24/7, seeing them every day, how they act and everything else. They really don't put us in consideration on what's going on, or to be able to help, be able to navigate the situation. That's what I'm seeing, especially on our end. Just mainly just not listening, not letting us have a voice.
I see it as all the things Kristie has said because I'm looking at it from two different sides as a foster parent and someone from legal. From the legal aspect, seeing the FCMs and the managers just being so overburdened with caseload. And I mean, when I first started there, all the cubicles were completely full. Then it became 2 people in an aisle. So the revolving door that is DCS. I stopped working there in 24, and it was right as Dr. Stigdon was stepping down and the new director was coming in. So I did not deal with the new director whatsoever. Kacey.
So I started at DCS just as Judge was leaving, and Stigdon was coming in. And I don't know if many people remember, but Judge wrote a very scathing letter to the governor about the problems that DCS was facing and how children would die because of the decisions and the direction that DCS was going. I don't know if any of you remember that time. That was probably 2017-ish. Wholeheartedly agree with that letter because when Stigdon took over, she had grand plans of changing the things that Judge saw. However, red tape and politics quickly took over for that. And we never saw policy changes for the better. As permanency, at that time, as permanency, I worked very closely with foster families and both emergency placements and long-term placements. And I heard the complaints and I tried my best. The direction, I remember very clearly the direction when I decided that, you know what, I need to leave for DCS. I need to leave the organization was during lockdown. There was a Netflix documentary about, what was his name? Gonzalez. And it was the family first policy, which Indiana had just established the family first policy, making it impossible for case managers and legal to remove children from households that they desperately needed removed from. And I remember watching that documentary during the lockdown and going, oh my gosh, this is what I experience every single day. And people and listening and watching social media and everyone just bash what happened. I'm like, you guys have no idea. This is exactly what we're facing. That is when I realized that the policies we were facing were going to cause the death of children because we were putting the cost of services before safety.
Yes.
And again, Kristen made a great point that a lot of times people don't realize DCS is reactionary. We are not preventative. And ironically, I love this part because it makes me laugh every single time, because do you know how many calls we would get about pregnant women doing drugs? Yeah, Kristen knows what I'm talking about. But here's the thing. DCS does not consider a child to be alive per policy. Now, Indiana law is very different, but Department of Child Services does not consider a child to be alive until it takes its first breath outside of the mother's body, which means there ain't nothing we can do about a pregnant lady using drugs. But Indiana law says that baby is a person, but Department of Child Services says, no, it ain't. I used to get skewered by people all the time. You can't do anything? Nope, cannot. But so that's where the reactionary comes in. And that's where the law, the Indiana law, Indiana policy, and what is happening in real time are so disconnected that why can't DCS take a call about a pregnant lady using drugs and get her services? Why can't we do that? If Indiana law requires me to acknowledge that woman, that is another life in her body, DCS then needs to step up and provide her services. So maybe when that baby's born, she will be okay, and that baby will then be okay, and we don't have to worry about safety, security, and well-being. So there is massive disconnect. And then I can't tell you how many times I was denied referrals for services that my kiddos needed because they were too expensive. I needed to find a different way because the state wasn't going to pay for that. And I'm sitting here going, I'm working in 2 very small rural counties. I have no other option. The DCS has what's called a permanency roundtable, and it's a very intensive table. Kristen's over here going, yes. When you cannot find any placement at all, and you're at the end of your timeline. So a timeline, for those that don't know, a timeline for a case once DCS removes, a CHINS case is what it's called, Child in Need of Services. You have 14 months. Well, if the child is under a year old, you have 6 months to reunify. If the child is over a year old, you have 14 months to reunify. Now, okay. If you are getting to the end of that line and you have nowhere for that child to go, but parents are doing everything they can and they're trying really hard, a judge is not going to say we're terminating. but we have to find somewhere for this kid to safely go. Most of the time, it's because we have children who have experienced such traumas and such mental health and have very significant mental health disorders or IQ, low IQ plus mental health disorders plus trauma, that there isn't a facility that will take them on a long-term basis. There isn't, there's literally nowhere for them to go. Family is worn out. Family can't take them. Family doesn't have the means to take them. So I went in front. You don't ever, let me just say, as a case manager, you don't ever want to have to go in front of the permanency roundtable because it ain't good. And because you get somebody from you get a group from the Indianapolis office, like the head honchos, they come in, you get multiple different counties that come in, and you have to stand in front of them and tell them everything you did, and they turn around and go and tell you everything you did wrong. But then you somehow have to figure it out. I remember the permanency roundtable I went to, and I was literally at my wit's end, and I presented everything. And not a single one said a word to me because they go, oh, well, you've done everything. Cool. Great. What do I do with this kid? And not a single person had an answer for me. That is a big issue because the more we cancel children's health care, the more we cancel children's ability to get food, the more we cancel children's ability to have quality education, the more we cancel parents' health care and their access to substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, everything, that roundtable is going to get harder and harder and harder. But DCS is going to say, but that's too expensive. We have to stop putting people's needs after profits.
Right. And that's the thing too, right? Is like DCS is used as a punitive measure against families because we aren't giving them the tools and the resources to successfully take care of their children. And then we're telling them, you're not good enough. We're telling them, hey, mom, I know that you've done everything you can for your special needs child, but how dare you not have the $30,000 to put this in this special program? So we're going to pull this kid out of your home. And are they going to get better treatment in foster care? No, because we're not going to give the foster parents the tools that they need either. And that's if the foster parents are actually qualified, because it's hard enough to get foster parents. And then you look for foster parents who are willing to take children who have special needs, who have those high-risk behaviors like fire setting, sexually maladaptive behavior. And we'll tell them, the foster parents, you're not doing good enough either. But here's this $30 a day or whatever if you're very, very fortunate, or if this kid is very high needs. And it just is continuing this cycle. I mean, it's not about what's in the best interest of the children. We will spend money all day long to take kids out of a house, but we won't spend money to keep kids in their homes. We won't spend money to actually take care of them. We just throw it at the wall and then get upset that we don't have different outcomes.
Or we require them to apply for beads, and that wait list is 3.5 years long.
Yep. Correct.
And so what are we supposed to do when our timeline is 14 months, but you have a wait list of 3.5 years? What do? Do you continue to roll this case kick the can, or do you help this family? But DCS is going to say, no, we can't, because we're running out of money on this case, because this case is, because what people don't know is that when you close out a case, there is a final court hearing, and that is when the court hands that family their bill for DCS. And that family is then ordered to pay whatever they can, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But we're involved 90% of the time because of poverty. But we're going to send you a bill for hundreds of thousands of dollars for getting involved. Now, there are times, because DCS gets used maliciously, I will defend DCS in this part. There are a lot of times that DCS gets used maliciously. Custody battles, he said, she said, baby mama versus baby mama. Like, yes, it is ridiculous the amount of times I got hailed into court to testify in a custody hearing. And that, when you get us involved, you absolutely should receive a bill. You absolutely should, because if my services have to come out at 2 a.m. to this kid's house because you didn't like how your ex-husband or ex-wife looked at your daughter or whatever. But I want full custody. You shouldn't have full custody, or I need more child support and you shouldn't have this. When you are wasting DCS's resources, absolutely, you should. And when you call, it does the automatic thing. When you make a report, it says, if this is a false allegation, if this is found to be, malicious, you can be charged criminally. I personally don't know a single time that has ever happened.
No, that does not happen.
But I do know how many times I have had to go out on custody battles and just sat there and looked at these parents going, are you kidding me right now? But again, DCS is reactionary. We are not preventative, so we can't do anything. On the flip side of that is I had a couple cases too where I begged for children to be removed and couldn't get them removed. And when the system is very broken, when a call can come in about a custody battle and a removal happens, whatever. But when I have a nonverbal toddler, 3-year-old autistic nonverbal toddler testing positive for methamphetamine, and I still can't remove, that's a problem.
Absolutely. And it's subjective. Everything is so subjective. And that's where these biases come in. So working in Hamilton County, there are families that have an exceptional amount of money, which great, pop off, do your thing. But then we get circumstances where I have one family, they're white. They have a, let's say, 3-year-old, 4-year-old with severe, obvious physical abuse is going on, but they hire an attorney. So we don't get to talk to that kid. We can't do anything to make sure that kid's okay. So we just close it out because we're not going to spend money even investigating it. But then I have a family where the child is Black and they're living in poverty. And all of a sudden, well, we need to yank that kid out of their home because they don't have an attorney, despite it having the exact same circumstances. And depending on the supervisor, their mood, is Mercury in retrograde sometimes? I don't know. That can be the difference between if a child is removed from a home or not.
Or your judge. Or you have a judge that's like, man, having a bad day. I'm just siding with parents today. No, I'm really mad that you messed this case up 3 weeks ago. So we're siding with the parents today.
Right.
And yes, the system is very broken. And, it is, and you're exactly right. My area, is extremely poor. And we have a massive drug epidemic here. And very little resources for those unless you're incarcerated if you are court system involved, there are more services out there for you than if you are not. But which most of the time, if you are not DCS involved or you're not criminally justice involved, your ability to seek out services is very slim because it is extremely expensive. But then I also want to throw out there, the problem is that when DCS becomes involved with a family, say it's an in-home, right? An IA, which is an informal adjustment, or an in-home chins, which means the court gets involved, but the children aren't removed. Those two instances, here's the thing. We make what's called case plans, which is every single thing a parent or family must do and complete before DCS will close out a case. Cool. DCS is also going to want you to maintain your house, pay your rent, work full time, take care of the kids, make sure they have a quality place to go, make sure they're clean, make sure they're clothed, make sure they're fed. Do you have enough food in your house? Also, do all these services in the random times of the day when you now have to take off work to attend these services. And now you're at the risk of losing your job because you're going to point out to get these services to keep your kids in your house. But then you might lose your kids anyways because you're about to point out of your job, which means you lose your job, which means you lose your house. And it is a vicious cycle that parents get into. And it's a zero-sum, zero-win game for everyone involved. But most importantly, for the children involved, because you're creating a bigger trauma by requiring all these things of the parent that they're now going to lose because they have to do all these things. And now you're kicking them out of the home that they likely have only known. And now you're telling mom and dad that, now they've got to go to a different school because now they got to find another place to live. And the trauma cycle continues. And that's where policy, yes, the people who are making these policies, I think they do it with good intentions, right? They do, but they are not boots on the ground. They have no idea what the heck is happening. And yes, do I think parents who have a substance use issue that get a DCS call on them, should they be attending substance abuse classes? 100% they should. It needs to be addressed because that is going to ensure safety for the child. However, requiring those classes to be done at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning when their shift is 8 to 4 p.m., not okay. Or you have to drive an hour to attend these classes.
Right. Can I push back lightly about just one thing that you mentioned about
Absolutely.
parents, if they're are using substances? I think a part of it too is that as FCMs, we're tasked with the role of determining, is a parent using drugs and is it impacting the child? Is the child being harmed by it? Because let's say mom and dad are both at home. Dad comes home, he smokes a joint before bed. I'm not taking that kid out of that home.
That's not a safety risk. You're exactly right.
Correct.
And there's a sober
I just wanted to make sure we clarified.
No, absolutely. No, you're perfectly fine. And Kirsten makes a good point. Sorry. If you have, if there is a sober caregiver in the house, you're fine, right? Like, I have no problem with the kids are asleep for the night. I'm going to go out on my back porch. I mean, not me per se, but I'm not going to go out. I'm going to go out on my back porch and I'm going to smoke a joint because that helps my arthritis. It helps my neuropathy because I was in a car accident, 10 years ago and whatever. And that's how I sleep. And that's how I become the best parent I can be but my kids are fine. I'm never fully impaired where I can't take care of them. All their needs are being currently met. I see no issue with that. I agree with you there, right? So not all substance use issues are issues, right?
Yeah, that's what I figured you were getting at. I was like, before it's on camera that you think every drug person using drugs.
No. Right. Because, no, there is, sober caregivers. That is, if there's more than one caregiver in the house, if you have mom, dad, and adult brother, and mom and dad have had a few drinks, but adult brother is fine, that's a sober caregiver. He's fine. There's safety. We have safety. We have security. We don't have to uproot everybody's lives because mom and dad have drinks. I do know when I was at DCS, Marion County would absolutely remove for marijuana, and they were notorious for it. And so if there were other factors in play, it would go into it. But generally speaking, it wouldn't be, marijuana was, least of our concerns.
To speak to that too, like the way that laws have kept up with DCS policies doesn't make sense because, like you said, marijuana may not be a concern, but I would get parents regularly that mom was smoking weed early in her pregnancy. She didn't even know she was pregnant yet, but that stays in your body. So then you have your child and the meconium or whatever is showing that there are traces of THC, and suddenly DCS is getting involved. And it's not because you were a bad mom, because you were using heavy drugs while you were pregnant. It's because a long, long time ago, you smoked a little bit and now DCS is getting involved. That's not appropriate. And I feel like our laws just have not kept up with what we now know. Like, is it the safest? No. But parents do a lot of things that are exceptionally unsafe that we're not going to remove kids for. Like, our laws around physical abuse in Indiana are insane for what we can actually remove a child for. I mean, if I have a kid who has obvious belt marks across their face, I was told not to remove that kid.
Only if it lasts longer than 24 hours.
Sometimes they had very obvious bruises. It really depends on the supervisor.
Right.
And it just depends on,
the way that Indiana law is written, you are allowed to hit your child. Their corporal punishment, whatever you define corporal punishment at, which means you can hit your child physically. And as long as a mark does not last over 24 hours, it is not considered abuse or neglect.
No, it's not. Well, and I think, so getting back into like issues with DCS, obviously we're not making money for removing kids because I would be a millionaire. I mean, there's always that one person in the office who removes more than anybody else, and that was me. Circumstances, because sometimes you get a report and you read it and you're like, if this is even a little bit true, I'm coming home with 2 kids later. But instead of DCS altering things to where FCMs are being paid more, to where there are higher standards for their staff to make sure that they're able to keep staff, to get like bonuses for like how long you've been with the agency, anything like that, they just lowered the standards. You don't even have to have a college degree anymore.
Yes, a high school diploma is all that's needed. And to that point, Kirsten, when COVID and lockdown was happening, which is when I was there, right? I was having to go into hospitals. I was having to PPE myself and go into hospitals and investigate these things. I was still having to go into homes and do these things, right? And, we never got a bonus while people were getting these, first responder, like, yay, bonuses. The DCS workers got nothing. Actually, we didn't even get raises because the state didn't give us raises for that year. So it's one of those things. And what people often forget is that DCS caseworkers fall under a first responder category, because when something happens during the commission of a crime and a child is involved, that 911 call automatically comes to DCS. And that is an immediate response for whoever is on call. And people forget that. It's one of those things that I agree. Indiana, and then they had the worker shortage, right? Because after COVID, people were like, absolutely not. And there was this mass exodus, me being one of them, right? And because I was tired of putting my safety and having to put other kids before my own. And, and it's not, when I had to choose other people's children over my children, that's when you have to walk away from a job, because it's not worth it, right? We work to support our families. We don't work and just have families. Like, our families always come first. And if DCS wants families to come first, shouldn't they do that for their workers?
It's almost like they should offer childcare.
You would think they don't. Funny story, I actually got written up as a case manager because I was on call and I got called out, and my person who I couldn't get a hold of the person to go get my child at the time. And so I always had a plan B. So I called my supervisor and said, hey, this didn't happen. I am working on my plan B. When I get my plan B, I will respond. Mind you, it was not an immediate response, right? I made it within my timeframes. I still got written up for it, for not having adequate plan for my own child, even though I made my response time. So tell me how that supports the DCS worker and gives you a quality worker to then do quality work. Because at the end of the day, you will want someone we need people who are educated, who have a heart, who know the systems. That is who should be investigating child abuse and neglect and ensuring safety.
And who believes kids.
Yes. And I mean, lowering your standards is going to result in child fatalities.
Couple points that I want to slightly push back on. When it comes to, you two were both talking about lowering the standards, not requiring college degree in BSW or even a college degree in general. But when someone has a plethora of experience with social work, but not being a technical social work, I think that is totally acceptable to be allowed to work at DCS, because they still have the experience of doing the job. I mean, a degree doesn't necessarily make you a better caseworker.
Right, but
because,
the current standards don't require any prior experience.
Well, see, okay, I'm going to push back on that one. So when that happened, when they lowered the standards, I actually tried to be a DCS worker.
Really?
Yes, I tried. I called, what are they, LDs or whatever they're called? Yeah. I called them. I spoke with them. And I asked someone in Ward County, I was like, well, why will you not give me the opportunity to interview? And they're like, well, you have no experience. I'm like, I've worked in mental health for over 20 years. I was like, I've been a foster parent for over 5. That right there should qualify me in a aspect, because I know what it's like on the other end. I was like, I used to be, a pre-K teacher. I understand all this stuff, but yeah, I'm not qualified.
I think this is where we get into the muddy water of when we don't have a baseline of at least having a college degree. It gets into what qualifies as experience. One of the last people that I trained in my office, his most recent job was selling cars. He had no experience in mental health, in child advocacy, in anything social worky, case management, anything like that. But they said that he must have people skills because he sold cars. And then I'm teaching this he's a grown man, how to write. And when you're dealing with court filings and how to write a case report and things like that, I think those are skills that you can learn, right? But I think it's significantly more likely that you're going to be able to come in with those skills if you do have a college degree as far as when it comes to writing and managing those things. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be comparable experience, but it's a lot easier to make a case for why a college degree might be necessary when experience is so vastly different for everybody, and it's difficult to outline exactly what that means.
I mean, you can say with the college experience, there are plenty of FCMs that I had to write up for court documents that I'm like, you went to college? You have a master's degree?
I believe it.
No, I believe that 100%.
Yeah, I know the quality in people that were being onboarded after they get rid of the college degree requirement changed. It shifted pretty drastically, at least I felt in our region.
I think they also did away when I started with DCS. Our training was 12 weeks, and it's not that anymore at all. So we would be in Indianapolis we would be in class from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, and for 2-week stints at a time. And then we would go, or 2 or 3 week stints at a time. I can't remember, but it was either 2 or 3 weeks. We would go to Indy, we would learn, then we would go to our counties, and then we would observe. And then we would go back, learn some more, and then we would go observe. And then it was a working test, right? So the training was incredibly intensive. And from my understanding, DCS does not have anything like that anymore.
I heard when I was trying to go in, when I would talk to the FCMs when they come visit the home and everything, yeah, you just go up to Indy for a week, and then the rest of the couple of months, you'll be at your home base learning and training there, and that's it.
So they did shift it. It's still 12 weeks technically, but they do virtual trainings for a lot of it now, so that FCMs aren't having to go from like Evansville to Indianapolis to do trainings that they could do online, and then they work with their peer leads. A lot more emphasis has been put on the peer leads that do the training now. So when you become a peer lead now, so somebody who is training people, you have to go through additional trainings yourself for several weeks to know how to get them up to speed, essentially. So it's a lot more localized.
That because one of the biggest complaints was when I was in training, somebody would ask a question. I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. And the response from the trainer would be, well, that's county specific.
Always.
The most cop-out answer on the planet. And that should never be an answer. To be completely honest with you, if DCS is going to do things right and do it well, county specific should never be an answer to how something is going to go, because DCS should have one policy and every single person follow.
Right.
Now, coming from the legal side, I will have to push back on that part, because yes, with the FCMs and the leads, I get that it should be statewide, but once you get it into legal's hands, every judge that sits on the bench is
so different.
Yes.
So what the judge in Monroe County would do is completely different than the 300 judges in Marion County is going to do from the 5 judges in Vigo County or whatever are going to do. So when it gets to legal, I mean, that's county specific all the time, but it even broke down more to that is judge specific. And even within counties that have multiple judges that do DCS cases,
you're right.
It depends on which court you're in. in the same county.
Absolutely. I think that's where you get into once if it's court ordered, that's not DCS's decision anymore. And most DCS calls don't result in court involvement. So I think there's a lot in the middle where legal's not getting involved that could be more clear on what expectations are. Especially when it's situations where we don't have that involvement, because that's best case scenario, right? Is, hey, we got called in and maybe you call Firefly or some kind of preventative service that magically exists because, most counties don't have real preventative services, but the ones that do, that's best case is we're able to get them whatever service. Best case is nothing happened, but second best case is we can get them services without DCS having to be involved.
I agree with that, Kirsten. But I also think, Derrick, yes, I see your point. It is judge specific, but there are also so many more policies that surround DCS that don't involve the judges whatsoever or the attorneys that need to be updated and fixed so that it is not county specific. And what I will say is that one of the biggest things is that DCS policies are also drawn up in response to current Indiana code, right? So let's take educational neglect for a second. So you can remove per Indiana educational code, you can remove your child from school for whatever reason you would like, and you can homeschool. You are not required to show the state of Indiana your curriculum. You are not required to show the state of Indiana any test scores, anything if you are a homeschool child. What if DCS gets called? What you do have to do is provide attendance. Now, what that attendance sheet could be is I could sit here and go, oh, we started school at this time, and I could write down 2 months worth of attendance on a piece of paper, and DCS has to accept. And per Indiana code, that is perfectly legal, and there's nothing DCS can do. The child might not have any curriculum, might not know how to read or count to 10 or 100 or whatever, but they're being homeschooled. But because of those laws surrounding Indiana education, DCS can't do anything about it.
Now, Kristie, from the foster side, what do you think DCS fails?
Honestly, the whole communication with the foster parents. That's where I see it. Miscommunications, not telling them the correct stuff or being misleading. That's pretty much about it on that aspect I can think of. So
that and proper CANS numbers.
Don't sit here and tell me that a child is a 2 when clearly they're a 7.
Tell me why. So I see a family. I'm an assessment worker. I've met with them for a couple of hours. I removed this kid because mom stole a U-Haul and was smoking meth, and this kid is 8 in the back of the U-Haul. This is a real case at 4 a.m., all of the things. I'm filling out a CANS. So for people that don't know, a CANS score is essentially this form that FCMs go through, not just FCMs, but case providers, other kind of providers fill out saying how high needs a child is. So if a child has sexually maladaptive behavior, if they have severe mental health needs, if they're self-harming, their CANS score is going to be significantly higher than a child who's dealt with their trauma pretty well. I'm filling that out after meeting with this kid for maybe 35 minutes. That's completely inappropriate. And it's, as far as DCS making that decision, it doesn't make any sense. I understand there has to be some sort of baseline, but for that to be the number that we're going off of, they need to do better, because it does lead to us lying to these foster parents because we don't know. We don't know enough information to be able to say, yes, this child is this level of need.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with you. And especially for those emergency foster homes, right?
Yes.
For the typical, for your normal foster placement, right? You have typically spent a decent amount of time, an FCM will probably have spent a decent amount of time with that kiddo and can give a pretty good, description, inform the fosters of what's going on, what's happening. But it's those emergency placements where you know nothing about that child. The emergency family knows nothing about that child, but you have to tell them, hey, I think it'll be okay. you got 6 other kids in your house now, but it might be all right. Call me in the morning. And that's not fair to the emergency placements at all.
It's not. And then the pressure is put on the foster care family case managers to not lie, because they're not encouraged to lie to foster parents, but to maybe downplay behaviors. And instead of there being a focus on how can we recruit more foster parents in a way that is meaningful, the focus is put on how can we mislead these people to take this kid no matter what. I mean, and then we don't have any sort of like group homes or anything that can take children with high needs a lot of the time. Or if they do, it's like, I know how my last kid was after they went there, and I'm not sending another kid there, but we don't get that discretion, of course. I mean, we aren't, what's the word that I want? We aren't investing in our families. Even after we do remove a child, there isn't that investment made. Exactly what you were saying earlier, Kacey. Like, we take these kids out of their home and then it's too expensive to take care of them.
It really is. And I think one of the most heartbreaking times I had as a DCS worker, and it also as a mom, like, I saw some pretty bad things. I will be the first to tell you. I know Kirsten has probably seen some really bad things. I've been a part of some pretty nasty cases. You name it, I've seen it. But one of the more heartbreaking things is I had, and here's the thing, is that parents get virtually no punishment for this. And this hurts my heart to say this. I had, 2 cases that I can remember immediately where parents refused to take their child back. I had a mom call DCS on herself because she did not want her son in her home anymore. So I'm standing there with police and she says, I don't care what you do with him, get him out. And I said, okay, understand you're committing a felony if you are doing that, because this is abandonment, which in the state of Indiana is a felony. She said, I don't care. And I'm sitting there trying to convince this mother to not do this, going, okay, can he go stay with your parents, grandparents, somebody for the weekend? Maybe you guys just need a weekend of separation, a 5-day caregiver change, which is a thing for DCS, right? Can we do that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You need to take this kid now. I am done. That parent never got arrested. But now I have to figure out something to do when the kid really may not have done anything wrong per se, but now I'm stuck trying to figure out placement. So I had that. Well, then I had a kid who did get into some legal trouble and was getting out of Southwest, which is now shut down, but that was a juvenile detention center run by the DOC. So I had to go. This mother, Southwest ended up calling DCS because this mother refused to come pick up her child from Southwest. This child had been locked up for a period of time. All they wanted to do was come home. And instead of mom coming home and then going to sleep in their own bed, they get me, a stranger, who now has to pick them up and take them somewhere they have no idea where they're going. Because at that point, I had no idea where I was going. Again, no criminal charges were filed. That to me is heartbreaking and abuse in and of itself, because that is emotional abuse and it is traumatic for those children. Did those children make some bad decisions? Probably. But as parents, we can't just give up on our kids and say, I'm done. Children aren't pets. You can't just take them to the shelter when you're done. You shouldn't do that to your pets either. But right, those were some of the hardest cases to work, because I'm sitting here as a mom going, I've got to go pick up this kid and have some sort of conversation with him and let this poor child know that they might be okay. We'll work it out. We'll see what mom thinks in a weekend. No, I have to essentially lie to this kid so that this kid then doesn't flip out and hurt me. So there's where, again, Indiana law and DCS differ, and I think needs, breaking thing, right? Is when, kids don't deserve to be removed by any means, right? It's not a safety or security risk. It's just the parent saying, I don't want them.
I was just going to say, I've had those cases as well, and it's heartbreaking, but it's also another example, though, of us as a state not supporting families, because it never starts with that they just want to get rid of their kid. It's they lost their job, so they're frustrated, and they're applying for jobs every single day, and they're doing their best, and it's not enough. So then they're frustrated. So they're getting mad at their kid because they're doing something annoying, because kids do annoying things. And then it escalates and escalates to a point that they don't have any coping skills left. So it's, I just can't do this anymore. And they're at a point where mentally, like, they can't do it. And once you're in that fight or flight state, like, you don't have the wherewithal to be like, okay, maybe I just do need a break, because you've already called grandma and aunt, and maybe if you even had those people in your life to begin with, those supports. And especially if you've got a child with special needs or who does have outbursts, because parents, I genuinely don't think most parents are abusive because they want to be abusive. I think they are perpetuating those cycles of abuse, or they have reached their breaking point because of systemic things. But now your child's traumatized and they're acting out like exactly like you said, and it just continues. But again, DCS isn't preventative, and there isn't any sort of preventative things in the state to take care of families. We just keep cutting things and then
You're
saying,
exactly
I don't know
right.
why all these parents are in jail, because even if the parent does get arrested, now what? Like, we don't have services for them to reunify if they're in jail, because we haven't invested in that either. Like, if you're incarcerated and we're like, we want you to get your kid back and you get out of jail in 6 months, well, we can't set up visits for you to see your kid because the jail doesn't have any sort of facilitation area for that. I mean, there's no path forward. So we just continue to set families up for failure.
Again, and it's like what I said before. It is a zero-sum game. It is a lose-lose situation for everyone involved. And because we're taking away the state of Indiana, even though we have a $4+ billion, $6 billion, whatever number it is today, because it keeps increasing, surplus, but yet, and we wonder why people are using drugs at an alarming rate. Well, because they don't have access to anything else and they need something, right? It's self-medicating. And that's what people are doing. And it's so sad because they don't have access to anything else. They don't have, and I think about, I was talking to someone about this because there's another candidate running for office, and they're talking about this, what is it, ALICE system on how to get out of poverty. And and step one is to move in with a family member. That's step one. Okay, cool. You would think that works, except I have zero family in the state of Indiana. None. Zip, zilch, nada. Outside of my husband and my 2 children, I have no one within 200 miles of me. Okay, what am I supposed to do? What happens if I lose my job? I don't have anyone to move in with. I don't have anyone to help me with my kids. I have no one. But don't worry, because the state of Indiana cut childcare vouchers, so my kids can't go to daycare, so what am I going to do? And now, again, they're cutting the requirements for daycare. That includes safety requirements for daycare and licensing for daycares, which will result in additional calls to DCS because daycares and more deaths. So many more deaths. I said that the other day and people were like, you're being melodramatic. I'm like, no, until you've seen the things I've seen through DCS, do not tell me I'm melodramatic.
Yeah, no, until you've talked to a parent about their dead kid, like 20 minutes after that, like, you don't get to say anything. Until you've seen brain on a driveway, actually just shut up. You don't get an opinion on it.
Or have a conversation going, do you have any animals in the house? Because if you do, this kid can't come to you because it poses now a risk to the animals. Or, hey, I have a sibling group who have all incested on each other, and per DCS, I have to keep them together in placement, but I need you to have a 6-bedroom house because these 4 siblings need their own bedroom. People are like, that doesn't happen. Oh, it happens.
Incest, I never could have imagined how much incest was occurring in our state until working for the Department of Child Services. Ever in a million years imagined how frequent it was.
Mm-hmm. And it is generational because you find out when you respond to that case, parents are like, I did it when I was 12. It was so. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, excuse me? And people wonder why, like with my own children, there are very few places that I allow my children to spend the night. I monitor the conversations my children have with family members, and they're like, you monitor conversations your children have with their own family? I'm like, listen, number one, your family is the number one reason your child will be abused, statistically speaking. It is not a stranger. It is not. Now, I do take those, my kids don't have Roblox. nor will they ever.
No.
Right. Like, I take all those precautions and I'm very well aware of other predators, but the majority of predators are within your own family, and people refuse to believe that.
They do. It's hard because we have this faith and this trust in the people that we surround ourselves with. And it's like we're trying to rely on these communities. But when you already have a limited community, you don't want to believe that somebody would hurt your kid.
Right. It's you think that the only monsters out there are the murderers and the rapists and the really bad child molesters, right? Those are not the people I am most afraid of for my children and their safety. And I think more people need to understand that, and they don't. But that's also why DCS exists, because at the end of the day, we're sitting here, we're telling you everything that DCS is doing wrong. However, DCS is absolutely, positively, and necessary service that has to continue to be provided to the state of Indiana and every child. Because yes, do they screw up kids? Yes, they do. But you know what? For every kid they screwed up, they have saved 10 from death or worse.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, like I was the infamous she's the one who's going to go remove a kid because I got a report that they didn't go to school for 2 days. So something insane happened, because of course it did. But most of my parents, we still had a very good, strong working relationship, even if I took their kid out of that home, because we had long, in-depth conversations. There was an understanding of what could have been done differently. Obviously not like our emergency situations, like the meth in the U-Haul. Like that's its own thing. But if I'm coming out to your home for the third time, you're going to have an idea of what's going on, because we've safety planned. We've done all of the things that we could, and it was still going to happen. And I think that FCMs don't get that acknowledgement either, because the way that we measure success in DCS isn't actually about child safety. We are going off of how quickly things are being closed and how low caseloads are, without actually measuring the results of those families. So if I get an assessment and somebody's gone out on it 6 times, I won't name names, they know who they are if they ever see this video. But if the same case manager has gone out 6 times and then I go out and I remove that kid because what the hell were you doing this entire time? And there's been obvious physical abuse, there's been obvious neglect going on over and over again. Now the numbers look like I am just some monster taking these kids. Well, why did it take 7 reports for us to get involved when nothing was changing? Why am I talking to this kid who's telling me that you knew dad was using your drugs? You knew dad gave this kid drugs. You knew there was physical abuse going on, but because this kid's a teenager, you were blaming the teenager. I mean, we're not actually measuring safety, and I don't know what the perfect metric is, but somebody a lot better at this does. And those things really need to be evaluated, because we can't just be closing things out and calling it safe. That's insane. That's how kids die.
I absolutely agree with you. And a lot of times people don't understand is that, for all the bad, case managers really have great relationships with the majority of the families they serve. I still talk to some of my families today and I check in, or they see me at the grocery store and they give me a big old hug and they tell me about all the things they've done, but they are thriving. And I sit there and I go, you know what? I did that. Like, I helped that family get to this point, and how flippin' cool is that? And a lot of time, and for as bad of a rap as DCS gets, but it's also deserved. As bad of a rap as DCS gets, there are case managers doing good, solid work, reunifying families, helping families get on their feet, helping foster parents achieve adoption if that was the goal for that particular case, because the actual permanency of that child was never happening, right? There are good successes that never get adequately celebrated or reported within the state, because we are so focused on those just involved and not the success. It is case open, case closed. That's all that gets reported, not the measure of the work that got put into it, the relationships that were built, and the trust that happened between that case manager and that family and that child, and the success that will continue because DCS stepped in.
Yeah. And I think we forget that because it's so easy to look at everything that's a challenge. I mean, we're not giving foster parents the support they need. We're not giving our kids the support they need. And it's hard to quantify success. And it's not sexy. It's not something that people want to see on the news because they don't want to hear about the good things, unfortunately. And we're more focused on how can we get people to watch the news, or how can we get people to have big, strong feelings without focusing on what's actually like helpful and impactful.
Well, before we get too deep into the weeds of what DCS is actually doing right, I want to hear from the foster side on if you have anything to say, Kristie.
Like I've been saying, my main thing is the whole, communication with the foster parents and everything else. My thing is I was listening about when it came to like holding accountability and everything else, and about getting in trouble for, a foster parent has to send a child to the hospital. Well, they're being admitted, especially behavioral health. They're being admitted. And did you know that a foster parent has to stay with the child the whole time they're in the hospital? If not, that's considered abandonment. Because I'll tell you one thing, when I was working in behavioral health, I had to sit there and do one-on-ones with kids that would come into pediatric area, and they were foster kids. And that's one of the reasons what made me want to be a foster parent, because I was watching this, talking to the kids and everything else. But when we had our own issue where we had to send one of our foster kiddos to the hospital or a behavioral issue, we were told we could not leave their side. If we did, then we were having our license pulled and being considered abandonment. And I think that's pretty crazy right there, that they would do that to the foster parents as well, instead of giving support.
We were there for the 48-hour hold?
72-hour hold.
72-hour, that's
Yep.
right. And only breaks we got were from each other and a 3-hour break because an FCM from a different county came up and sat with a foster child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
That's
though we
from
had
experience from us.
Yeah, even though we had 3 other foster kiddos in the house on top of our own child. And it's like, we got to be able to give care to the other children too. We don't think this is right. So that's something else they need to look into on being able to, help with, to, get less stress off of the foster parents.
Understand why that would be necessary either, because that's the point of the staff in that facility.
Well, yeah, because I used to work at IE Bloomington, and they stopped doing that. And it even baffled me because, after I left there, I'm like, are you serious? You cannot give a one-on-one for, my foster kiddo so I can go home and take care of my other kids and come right back? And they're like, nope, sorry, we got to do it. You got to do it. We can't do it. But if they have a meltdown or anything.
Yeah, I will say I, as an FCM, was in the same boat you were. I had to take one of my kiddos to the hospital. I was not allowed to leave that child at all. So I had to spend the night at the hospital with that kiddo, because so then I had to find overnight care for my own children. So listen, I get it. And that is absolutely part of the broken, because okay, my kids now have to figure out something else so I can be with, there should be agreements with hospitals, staff, whatever, that, if a child involved is coming in, then the hospital should be able to provide secure staff to be with that. It's like if a kid flies by themselves, right? A flight attendant is with them the whole time. Why can we do it on airplanes, but we can't do it in hospitals, right?
Like I said before, when I worked at IU and I was working in behavioral health, I would do one-on-ones. But, here it is. I left. It's been a couple of years. And then I'm the, parent on the other side needing this help, and they don't offer it. You contact DCS. They really don't want to help. I mean, we were with an agency, so thankfully we were finally able to get somebody to come out and relieve us for a couple hours. But I just think that's one thing that needs to be really brought up is, kind of like do like a little, I know we have respite and everything in foster care, but actually have like a group of it, to be able to help in these type of circumstances.
But with the same thing is that the foster care numbers are so few and far between, right? Because no one wants to be a foster care, because no one wants to jump through all those hoops that you have to jump through to be a foster parent. And, or they Or they sign up to be foster parents, but they will only take infants.
I'll only take somebody under 1 who's white and their parents have to be Christian and their eyes
No
have to
drug
be blue.
cases.
No drug
Yeah.
cases, no criminal. I mean, literally. That's exactly how it goes. Like, I remember my longest shift at DCS was 36 hours of work. And that's not coming home and taking care of kids and everything like that. I mean, it's active work, but then for foster parents to have to do that and then be expected to go home and take care of 3 other kids, I mean, that doesn't even make any sense.
Originally, we were only doing like school age, and it would match up to our daughter, to her age. And around her age, it'd be girls only because we didn't want boys coming in, obviously. But then we started to drop it down some. So, I mean, we changed our age range around and everything. Now, I will say, because we're in Martinsville, it's like, we really can't let the colors come to Martinsville, but it's like, I'm thinking of the safety of the child as well.
Right. It's a safety measure at that point. It's not
Right.
because you're being racist by any means. It is safety.
Right. Because, I mean, we've had supervised facilitators, flat out say, we will not come to Martinsville. We do not feel safe driving on the back roads. Can you meet us in Whiteland or somewhere? And that's what we would have to do. We would have to, take the child back and forth, in which we were fine with it. But, just hearing them say that, and it's like, yeah, we kind of got to keep, the race on what we can have here. If we were somewhere else, we'd be open for it. If Martinsville wasn't what it is, even though it's growing now, we'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll take whatever, just as long as the kid has a home to be in instead of sleeping in the office, because that can't be comfortable.
I mean, we never personally turned down a child because of the color of their skin, but yeah, it was a safety issue, especially for
makes a lot of
school-age
sense.
children. So we were just trying to not put a child in the situation that they did not need to be in, especially with everything they were already going through.
Yeah.
All they
That
needed
makes a lot of
was,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't, yeah, but that's good foster parenting, right? Saying, hey, I can't take this child because where we live, it is not safe for them. That's not being picky. That's being good parents, because that means you're not continue to traumatize a child that's already being traumatized by their current situation. You're not putting more abuse on this child because, heaven forbid, you send them to public school and now they're going to get bullied or beat up because of the color of their skin. That is you being proactive and good parents, knowing the limitations of your community, because that is huge. If you know the limitations of your community, you should tailor the kids you foster to that.
I mean, it's so sad that even our daughter hides her Hispanicness from, most people at the school. So, yeah.
It's sad. It's very sad. And I hate that is the Indiana we live in. But unfortunately, since 2016, it has been celebrated, if you will, and perpetuated, and that's not the world that I choose to raise my children in, or that's not how I choose to raise my children. And that's, shameless plug. That's why I'm running for office, because I want to change Indiana. And I know Kirsten's probably in the same boat too. She and I have big views on what Indiana needs to change and how we need to change it so that things like that don't happen. So that foster parents don't have to worry about the child they are trying to save, the color of their skin, to whether or not that child's going to be safe in their home.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that are currently in power, like the last person who ran DCS before the current one, I mean, he's never worked in child safety, neither had the person before him. Neither one of them have ever worked in that world. And I'm sorry, have you ever had a child disclose sexual abuse to you? And it's just like, no big deal. No big deal. Just my brother raped me and it's just fine. And they're like, so anyways, you don't know what the hell's going on. So then to be in a position of power where you're making decisions about this master agency, and it's absurd. We don't have not anybody, I misspoke. We have very few people who are currently in positions of power, currently in the state house, who have actually worked anything like this. And it's not enough. We have a bunch of, I'm trying not to blame white men all the time, but we have a bunch of middle class to upper class white men who have never worked a damn job in their life and have never had a hardship outside of, what steakhouse do I want to go to this week? I know that's a really difficult choice. Go to Five Below, or not Five Below, go to Five Guys again for the third time this week. Up your cholesterol because you're 75 years old and going to die in 2 years anyways. Go focus on that and stay the hell out of people's legislation and stay out of these policies because you don't know what you're doing. But that's what we've got. We've got a bunch of people who have never actually worked in these communities in charge. They don't even know what it means to be in poverty. They just know that they think they're better than those people every single time.
And the pro-life laws that Indiana is initiating will continue to add to the problem that DCS faces because you are forcing people to have children that don't have the means to take care of this children, which means DCS is going to continue to get filled and just be backlogged with cases, and children will die, children will get hurt, and it's a cycle that will never end as long as those pro-life, pro-birth laws continue to be in this state and in this country.
And thank you for saying pro-birth, because they are not pro-life. If you're
Bingo.
pro-life, you would help from birth until death. Pro-life does not mean extending the death penalty. Pro-life is everything. So let's stop bashing DCS and let's think of anything that's good about the agency.
You know, how we still, like, to this day, I have great relationships with former families that I helped, and we talk to each other and we see each other in the community, and, you know, they still lean on me, right? They'll text, Kacey, I'm having a really hard time. Like, you know, and so I talk to them, I talk them down, right? And people forget that DCS is made up of humans. We are not a machine. I say we like I'm still there. DCS is not a machine. It is made up of human people, right? Yes, they make mistakes, but you know what? The majority of FCMs are putting their heart and soul into their jobs, and they see shit people only think exists in Hollywood and in the most horrific of movies. But it's not. It's real life. And they still show up for these children every single day, and 9 times out of 10 work miracles that they pull out of fucking nowhere, excuse my language, because that's what they're doing. And they get either families reunified, they get families help, or they find a new loving family that takes these children, and these children thrive and they grow and they succeed. DCS does that, and for the most part does it very well, but when they fail hard.
I think one of my favorite memories, there's two that come to mind. One of them is I was at one of my kids, not my kid, my DCS kid's graduation party because she desperately wanted me to go. And I'm walking out of my little gift basket like, oh, yeah, you graduated. And she introduces me as, that's the lady who took me from my parents. And I'm like, thank you for that. You could have called me anything else, but thank you. But also, there have been multiple parents who have called years later to say thank you because I was not in a place that I could take care of my kid. Now I'm sober. Now I'm working. Will you come see me at my job? Will you come see how great the kids are doing? And who the hell am I, except for the lady coming out, knocking on your door, hey, do you abuse your kid? But we built those relationships, and that's so powerful because exactly what Kacey was saying, they are people. And a lot of the failures that occur within DCS are because we're not investing in the people within that agency, and we're not investing in the families that are being impacted by them. The failures that come 9.9 times out of 10 are because we said that we couldn't afford to help people. We could only afford to put them in jail, or we can only afford to take the kids. We couldn't afford to take care of them.
And those are the cases that I think are awesome, where the parent needed a little bit of help, needed help to get over something. And that's what DCS was built to do.
Yes.
It wasn't built to be a child repo machine.
Yeah.
Even though at DCS we did say that we were the repo people. Because, you know, dark humor or us screaming into the void. And
I'm a lot
I think
funnier
that's what
since
DCS was designed to do. Give parents the help they needed before they fell off that ledge. Kristie, from the foster care area, what did DCS do right, or what does it do right?
No, I mean, so DCS, yes, they have their good qualities. They do. And also, FCMs and everything, that's where the issues were. You have your good ones and you have your bad ones and everything. But regardless, DCS, yes, they do try their best. And they are completely overwhelmed, with kids coming in over and over, or repeat and everything else. It's exhausting. It's draining. And I get it. I've seen it on their faces when they come in the house and doing their check-in or, whatnot. But policies, it just needs to be changed. Some other things, real quick, how for a foster parent to have their voice in court, you have to wait 12 months. Honestly, I think it should be shorter, especially if they're around the kids for, 24/7 and everything, and they know what's going on. They should be able to put an opinion in, so that way it can help with reunification. And if it's not reunification, then for, long-term or adoption or whatnot. But that was another big thing that, I really didn't care for, was the 12 months, you gotta keep your mouth shut. So, but if they do that, then things will be a lot better. That's pretty much, I'm going off the rail on that part. It's like I'm going to keep just yelling. But, I mean, I don't want to completely bash on DCS. I don't. I'm only mad about certain things. But I do believe they can get better.
Yeah, I think it's hard because there is that balance of making sure that foster parents aren't just going in with the intention of adopting and thinking that they're building their perfect family, because kids do want to go home most of the time, and that's the main purpose of foster care. So that's a tough one, because it is hard for those cases where those kids aren't going home. And it's like, how can you determine that earlier? Like my very first removal, I knew they weren't going home from the get-go. We knew that. Nothing was ever going to change. But there does need to be a better system to make that clear so that the kids can move on, foster parents can move on, and we can find permanent homes. You're right.
I mean, even if the current foster home isn't their permanent residence at the end, even if the foster home was just a stopover during a horrible, horrible time in their life, because not every foster child meshes with the, permanent family.
Or it could be their forever home too.
Yeah. So you never know what the situation is going to become. I mean, we had kids that we loved them to death, but they were not, we were not their forever parents. We were their temporary parents when they needed someone. I mean, out of the entire system, we fostered, God, I can't remember how many kids, but we only adopted one out of that entire system. Yeah. So, I mean, we were going to adopt, we were in the process of adopting a young teenage girl. It did not work out. So, I mean, we were filing court paperwork for adoption, and it just fell apart.
It was because of sabotage. That's what it was. She always sabotaged. When it gets close to doing something real, it would get sabotaged, set back. So, yeah, that's what it was. But the other kiddos, I mean, heck, we've had one kiddo that was at our home for less than 24 hours. It's like, I get a call from FCM. Hey, this kiddo's, aunt and uncle is going to take them. That's great. Let me get their stuff together. What time are you going to be here? Yada, yada, yada. Then you got others that are thinking they're going to go to their grandparents. But in reality, the FCM shows up to take them to a group home. And that starts, it's that whole IC, whatever it is thing.
Oh, the interstate compact.
Yeah, interstate compact. It was the whole mess with that. And it's like, I am so sorry. And it's heartbreaking even for, the foster parents, whether it's reunification or whatnot, because they've spent that time and energy with those kids or, kiddo, trying to give them as much attention and love and everything they can. And then they're being, put back in their home, which is great, or they're going to another place. So
to defend DCS a little bit, on your timelines, those are not set by the state of Indiana. Those are actual federal. So Indiana that is not something Indiana can change. That 14 months, that 6 months, that 12 months, those timelines are set by federal laws. And so unfortunately, as much as Indiana, I think as much as Kirsten and I will change Indiana laws, that is not something we can begin to touch.
Even to be able to speak
that's
to the courts.
Yep. Because the ICPC, the Interstate Compact is that is a federal law. So everything that has to do with that, those are all federal guidelines that Indiana's like, you have to follow these. We have nothing to say, and a judge can't do anything about it either. And that sucks, right? Because none of us might agree with it, right? If you know 3 months in that permanency needs to happen with the foster family that they're at, you can't do anything because federal guidelines states you have to wait a minimum of 6 months. And that sucks.
Now, moving away from what's good about DCS and what's bad about DCS, you are both, Kacey and Kirsten, are both running for state senate. Currently, one of the state senators that is a Democratic state senator sits on the committee that oversees DCS, J.D. Ford. He is stepping away to run for Congress. If elected and if you get assigned to that committee, what can you do as a former DCS employee do to improve that committee? Let's start with Kirsten.
There are so many things we can do. I think the first thing that we can do is we can take a field trip. I think if you're going to be sitting on that committee, then you can go to an office and you can really live the day as an FCM and just ride along, see what's going on. Because guess what? You're a state agent. You've had all your checks and you have the authority to do that. So I think you need to get your ass out into the field and see what's really going on. Because until you have seen it, experienced it, felt it, had a real conversation with the people working in there, you don't know. People might have issues with Terry Stigdon, but I will say every day, at least she showed up. At least she went into the field, because I have never met any of those other directors of that agency, and I doubt there are many FCMs who have. And I think that it's really important for us as state senators to take time to really understand like what the nitty gritty is in the field. Because the same way that we have town halls to understand what our regular communities are going through, we need to have that same thing in agencies like DCS, because what sounds like it's really important at the State House is vastly different from what's really going to have an impact on families. So I think having a field trip, making sure that there are people in the room who really know what's going on. So not necessarily LODs, because I think they can be a little out of touch as well, but supervisors, FCMs, foster care workers, foster parents, I think they need to be a part of the conversation. So pulling them in any opportunity that we can and building those relationships from the get-go and maintaining them, I think those are all things that we can do as senators.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with Kirsten. I think when she and I get there, we are going to pull from our own experiences, because Kirsten and I just met each other this evening, and she and I have very similar experiences as DCS case managers, right? She and I are like, yes, I remember, I've done that too. Yes, I've done that too. No, we need people who have been there. We need people in making our laws that have been in the trenches with everyday people, right? You can't make a good law if you've never done the job, right? It's why teachers should be making laws about education, why DCS workers should be making and having the input about laws surrounding DCS, right? I think I'll take it a step further, Kirsten. I think someone should do an on-call. I think not just a ride-along, because you know what? That's when you see the real stuff, right? Because that is when you stay back and you go, holy shit, this is what the people deal with, right? Because I too, right? We do at DCS, your on calls are 24 hours. I had a weekend on call, and of that 48 hours for that weekend, I worked 37 of them, right? And until you have done that shift, and until you have put in those hours with no sleep and zero resources, and somehow you're keeping yourself from driving off the road and still maintaining safety for a child, and your own family is still surviving, you have no idea what these DCS workers are going through. You have no idea how hard it is for ICPC placements when you have to wake up at 2:00 in the morning, get yourself to the Indianapolis airport, fly to Orlando, Florida, have 2 hours on the ground, and then get back, ensure safety, have a conversation with this kid, a meaningful conversation with the kid, then rush back, fight traffic, get back on a plane, and get back to Indiana all within a 24-hour period, right? Those are the things that people who make laws don't see, they don't experience, but they have to, because until you've been in those shoes, you can't even begin to make a law that governs them.
Now, not only does this committee deal with DCS, but also its former parent organization, FSSA. So they should have to also do a day living the life of an FSSA. I don't know what they're called over there.
You're okay.
Employee.
Typically caseworker.
Have to learn what the actual human beings, what the Hoosiers that are asking for help from FSSA are actually doing. Because what they believe, and I'll even say it, rich old white men, what they do not understand is it's not people looking, not always, people looking for a handout. It's people that hit a speed bump that needs a little help. One of the most
100%.
common things that are said, especially by the other side, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I hate that term because, first of all, you can't pull yourself by your own bootstraps. It's stupid to even say that. Not everybody got where they are by themselves. And I can guarantee you 90% of the Indiana State Senate did not start off having to build their own name, their own wealth.
They were gifted that pair of boots and they were gifted that shiny ass watch that makes them look so fancy in their meetings. All of that was gifted. And I think it's really important for us to note too, next year's a budget year. And that is the year that we can invest in our families and that we can actually make a difference. Because like Kacey mentioned earlier, we've got a surplus. So we've been paying in and paying in and paying in. And I hear people complain that their taxes are too high. Okay, where'd that money go? It didn't go into your families. So if we've got the surplus, that means that we do have money that we can invest into our systems to make sure that we're taking care of people. That's just the only other thing that I would add is I'm sure Kacey would agree with that, is like making sure that our tax dollars are actually going to solving problems instead of just treating everything as a punitive measure.
And statistics show, I mean, there is evidentiary support that when you give people everything they need, housing, shelter, healthcare, education, food, they are going to thrive. And when people get those things, they end up needing less and less assistance once they have them because they're able to build upon that, right? When you feed children, when you give parents livable wages, you are going to have less dead children.
And that's the
Point
goal,
blank.
right?
Right.
So when you're talking about taxes, you also have to think about House Enrolled Act 1 from 2025 and how much that pulled away from not only counties, but state agencies.
I've heard from, so part of me running for office, I've been meeting with every mayor, county, city council, fire, law, everybody who's public works. I've learned so much stuff that I never wanted to know because I don't think I can be a good representative if I don't. And you know what every single one of them has told me that's been willing to meet with me? SEA one. And you know what I've asked all of them? Did your legislator ever reach out to you? Absolutely not. They did not. I've met with our coroners, with law enforcement. I'm meeting with street workers. I'll talk to anybody. You own a Starbucks? Let's talk. I bet you have a reason to bitch about this bill too, because it's bullshit. And it set people up for failure every single time. I mean, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. Everybody's being hit. Every law enforcement agency, every cop that I've talked to, every paramedic is dealing with the same thing. So if we're really a state that works, our little logo, we're a state that works, well then let's get to fucking work and let's invest in actually doing that. Sorry, SEA wants my soapbox.
Slogan right there. Right there. If we're a state that works, then fucking let's get to work.
Right. But you know, the same people that are essentially defunding police are the ones that back the blue.
And what they don't understand is they're actually defunding the police. When we would say defund the police, we never meant to take money away from the police. We were talking about adding social services.
Giving them resources.
Exactly. It was never taking money away from them. It was giving the police departments more to work with, more support.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
You
are
know that's why
actually
I'm running for
taking money
office.
away from them.
Did you know that's why I'm running for office? I was working with our sheriff department in our corner to develop social work programs in our county for preventative work. And then SEA 1 pissed me off enough because they couldn't fund my programs that that's why I ran.
I personally did know that because I've interviewed you twice.
Yeah,
But
fair. Fair. I can't remember who I've told what, but it's spite because I want to fund the
I
damn
love that.
police.
and that's usually the best reason to run for office is out of spite.
Truthfully.
I mean, that's why I ran in 24. I got tired of the fact that you do everything that you're told to do. You went to school, you got a degree, you got a job, you had a family, you did everything you were supposed to do, and that boot is still on your back, and you can never get ahead, no matter how much you freaking try, because you didn't start with that trust fund. You started at the lowest to lowest society. And you built yourself, like me personally, I built myself so freaking high up, but yet still middle lower class. How the hell is that possible? That's exactly why I ran. And I mean, the congressman that's in the 4th district of Indiana, Jim Baird, but he was given everything. I mean, he hasn't had to worry about where his next paycheck's coming from. Hasn't had to worry about coming out of retirement to get another job because their VA benefits can no longer support a family of 4. I mean, I'm blessed that I could get a job back with the federal government. That is also why I'm not running for Morgan County clerk.
Well, it is very clear that the three of us got into this business to serve our communities and to help our communities thrive and not serve ourselves, right? This conversation today has made that very clear for us, right? Because Kirsten and I have shared the work that Kirsten and I have shared the work that we've done. But also Derrick and I, you have had that conversation too in my interview with you, right? Not a single one of us is doing this to get rich because let's face it, we won't, right? And actually a lot of us are spending our own money and because no one has money to donate, right? Because you're asking your constituents to donate to your campaign. Well, our constituents have less than what we do, which is why we are the ones deciding to fight for them. So, we're taking our own money and using our own time and our own resources to fight for these people. It is very clear in our messages that we are not doing this to self-serve us for notoriety, for anything other than Indiana's a fucking disaster. People are barely surviving and it's time for a change.
Okay, final words. Let's go with Kristie. Your final words.
Need a drink. Dear Lord. No, actually, this roundtable has actually been informative. I mean, even as a previous foster parent, oh my God, here he comes. Foster parent, learning other stuff on the aspect that, my FCMs would have never shared with me or, maybe they have shared with me and I just forgot because it's been an ongoing thing and we've been hit with COVID and all that other glory stuff. But no, I mean, I do appreciate sitting here with you guys and listening to everything and what your guys' plans are for your area, and I wish the best of luck for both of you.
Thank you.
Let's go to Kacey this time.
As much as we said what was wrong with DCS, the majority of the work that the FCMs are doing day in and day out is good work and it saves lives. And DCS is a necessary entity within the state. However, Hoosier families deserve to have resources so that they don't ever get into the position where DCS has to knock on their door. And I think as senators, that's what Kirsten and I are going to work towards. That's the Indiana we want to see. And I've enjoyed this conversation because I got to travel down memory lane and talk about my time as DCS. And, while I think about all the bad, it also brought up some really cool memories for me. And I'm thinking about the families I served and some just really great moments, right? But I also think about the time that I was physically assaulted by, a person I was investigating when I got called out, right? People don't realize that happens. And Indiana has a lot of faults, but I still see the good in every person. And we need to work to make sure we can pull out that good in every person and make sure kids are not just surviving, but they are thriving, right? We need education that is fully funded. We need to fund Sunbucks so that kids who are in impoverished areas get fed when they're not at school, right? We need to make sure that our tax dollars are going to things and programs that are benefiting all Hoosiers and not just the wealthiest. And I think that's what I hope this roundtable really shows everyone is that yes, DCS does a lot of bad, but it also does way more good. And if we get the right people in office making the policies that govern DCS, we can make DCS better and we can make Indiana better.
Kirsten.
Damn, that's a tough act to follow up. I think, first of all, thank you, Derrick, Kristie, Kacey. This was wonderful. I am always looking for an opportunity to talk about DCS because it is the best, worst thing I've ever done in my life. You don't do that kind of work because you've had an exactly perfect life. You do it because you've had just enough trauma and just enough support to want to do something about it and to make sure that other people didn't go through that too. DCS is what led to me getting my master's in social work because I saw systemically people are doing their best every day. People in DCS, the families that we were working with, everybody is doing their best. Derrick, exactly what you said earlier. People are trying so hard and it's not enough. And that's not fair. As state representatives, it's our job to listen and to represent the people. And I think that's really what we've talked about tonight is that we've been there and seen what families have gone through. And that is why we need to be involved in this part of the process. Like you said, DCS is a lot of things. There are a lot of failures. There are a lot of cracks, but it's not going to get better by continuing to take money from these programs. It's only going to get better if we invest in them and invest in our communities. And if it's about money, make it about money. It's cheaper to take care of people. It's cheaper to put in preventative services than it is to put them in jail or to remove kids from their home.
I want to thank Kristie Holder, Kacey Blundell, and Kirsten Root for joining me tonight for this roundtable. And to everyone watching, wherever you're from, please remember, stay informed, keep asking questions, and as always, hold them accountable.